I'm in Jane Austen country, about an hour away from where I live. So not that far. I thought Jane Austen's house, which I will visit before I finish today's walk. I'll go and take a photograph of the house. I'm not quite sure I'll be able to go inside due to the fact I've only brought one pair of boots with me, these ones, and they're going to be a bit muddy by the end of this walk. But yeah, Jane Austen country. And I have an interesting story about Jane Austen, which I'll share with you during the show today. I'm not sure I've told you this one before. I think this might be a new story. Yes, a new story, Neil. Yeah, I think it will. My other listeners now looking at me saying with their eyes, Jane Austen? You've not met Jane Austen, I know. There's a few years between us, but I'll share it with you later on. Let me make a sketchbook picture. Beautiful countryside. I don't know where I'm walking. I just saw, as I was coming back from a commercial job, which I'll tell you about in a while as well, I just saw a sign for Jane Austen's house. And I thought, oh, really? I'll go off the beaten track. And I have. And so I've ended up at a place I've never visited before. But that's the beauty of of sometimes having a bit of time on your hands thinking, oh, I was expecting to walk somewhere else, but let's change our mind. Right, a sketchbook image. 180th f4, 160, and I'm using my X100. But I thought today I'd shoot with classic chrome and experiment a bit. There we go. There's a sketchbook photograph to start the show. Experiment a bit with some of the film simulations, which I've used Fujifilm cameras for many years, but I very rarely use the JPEG film simulations. So today, I like to think today is a real show of hope and ideas.
And I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I got out of my bed and went and sat in the chair by the window and watched the sun come up. The view from my hospital room, everything was red and gold and orange, all the trees, and you get that little bit of dew because it's a bit cooler in the morning, and it was just absolutely beautiful. I have a picture that I took with my cell phone.
That's Tracey Halladay, and there are many interviews I record for the studio guest portion of the show where after them I need to take a few minutes out really with a cuppa and a photo book. Or better still, a cuppa, a photo book, and Garibaldi. That's before I can take a call or reply to a mail or talk to anybody, really. Sir Barkalot's usually quite good for those moments. He's not with me on the walk today because, I had a commercial shoot early doors, and I didn't think I could get away with a fluffy assistant on this particular one. Plus, if I do go to Jane Austen's house, I'm not sure a muddy Sir Barkalot would be allowed. But yes, he's very good at those times when I've finished an interview where I think, I just need a few moments now, because he's pretty much there for all the studio interviews these days. It's like his own quiet time in the studio. He's got a seat in the corner, which was supposed to be my library book reading seat. He jumps straight up onto it, curls up, and I click a switch for a red on-air light that Sir Mally of Treeland actually bought for me last year. It's a very bright red LED light that shows that the studio is in recording mode. Very handy for when don't tell anybody, very handy for when I need a nap and I want to keep the family out. And then right at the end of the recording, which is often an hour to hour and a half, I snap the switch into the off position and he wakes up instantly, like he knows. My conversation clearly does keep him asleep, but the switch clicks him into a consciousness. He does as we call it, a big stretch. Then he just sits and looks at me. A kind of, it's a look of, do you need a moment? Should we do a tummy scrunch? And I think today's studio conversation was definitely one of those chats. I'm all the emotionally richer, as I say, for having enjoyed a conversation with Tracey Halladay. a photographer I'm pleased to have been introduced to by Glenn Sowerby, who's one of our extra milers, actually, and hopefully you will feel the same way for yourself when you've heard the conversation today. It's definitely, as I say, with a football metaphor, a story of two halves. Tracey Halladay is a creative spirit. She's a nature photographer based in the southeast Rockies of British Columbia, which is still Canada, whose work is a conduit for emotion, for connection, and for standby, overused word alert, but I think in this case it counts, and also for passion. The title of the show, Wandering the World with Eyes Wide Open, is actually taken from Tracey's website. It was one of those we really don't need to try and be clever here and rewrite a title moments, because I thought her words there perfectly describe the conversation you're about to hear today. That openness, the vulnerability, that thing being human so uniquely brings to us all. I think that's being celebrated on this show today, through Tracey and through your letters.
Today on the Photo Walk.
As I started walking this road back and forth, I started realizing that I was just seeing things that I'd never noticed before. Just sitting in the ferns and the moss and just the ocean sounds and everything. It was amazing. It's a very hard thing to do, to admit to yourself as well as to other people that you're not capable of healing yourself. Just the sound of the birds and the river and everything would just kind of calm you down, and it slows your breathing, slows your heart rate, makes you relax. Everybody threw a photo into a Facebook group after, and it was really interesting to see what people saw when they just slowed down. Now I'm at a point where I want to get out and experience everything that I can and not miss out on things because I'm too scared or because I feel that I'm not in good enough shape.
That's Tracey Halladay, my guest on the show today. Welcome along as we make our photo walks together, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, accompanied by the letters and inspirational stories you send in, plus talking with our special guests from around the world. I'll take a peek into a very, very full mailbag in a moment for a flavour of today's letters we have. But before that, thank you to those who believe in the cast enough that you're Patreon members. And a special thank you to friends that have been with us from the start, pretty much as sponsors. A service I use for buying, selling and trading used camera gear is MPB. As a website platform, mpb.com is the place where I can safely buy, sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online. And online guarantees make this a place I feel safe to buy from, unlike some other marketplaces. Here's how it works. You go online to mpb.com and search for gear that you'd like to add to your kit bag. Or if you're selling gear you no longer need, click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading and just follow the very easy instructions. From there, you print off a packing label, stick it on the box with all your gear in it. It's collected by a courier free of charge from your front door. And the best bit, MPB pays you for your camera gear within days. So join me and the hundreds of thousands of photographers every year in the US, Europe and the UK who know that MPB is the place to buy, sell, trade and create. Right, on the show today, Ewan McNeil shares why glass is his platform of choice over Instagram, and he's not exactly a voice in the dark, Kelvin Brown invites Flickr users to join a new group celebrating the Photo Walks assignments. Tracy Ainsley has checked into a lighthouse keeper's cottage. Chris Smith asks you to think about what your "this is me" image might be. Xavier Shaver has a poem for the path from a kayak, inches from the hungry-looking, menacing glance of an alligator through what looks like a short focal length. And one final reminder for this month's one-word assignment. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. Have you got some spare film or maybe an extra SD card? Check. And a copy of Pride and Prejudice, just to look like you're one of the locals. Let's walk. There's a lovely church just here. Everything today, by the way, will take on Jane Austen must have walked these paths, or, Jane Austen must have leant against that tree, or, because there's some beehives over there, Jane Austen must have tended to those beehives. And in this case, Jane Austen must have been to this church and sat in the pews. Let me get a picture. Right, X100 today, as I say. Let's go 5.6, f5.6. And here we go. 1/2/5, ISO 640. Oh, hang on, that's far too bright. Something else you can hear in the background that definitely would not have troubled Jane Austen. There we go. There's another sketchbook photograph for the show page today. Yeah, I may have to dip in and out of recordings today because we're just down the road, just down the road from RAF. Oh, what is it? RAF. Oh, it's an RAF base. That's the home of the Chinook. I've got a plane coming one way, planes to the right of me, helicopters to the left. Here I am, stuck in the middle of a field with a Chinook about to go across. I may do a clever fade from one moment to the next. Jane Austen, I tell you what, she didn't have to deal with this. Chinooks, while she was doing what Jane Austen did. I tell you what, let's do a bit of history. That's a clever way to recover this moment. A bit of history about Jane Austen. And then I can go for the first letters of the show today. Come on then, Studio Neil. Tell me about Jane Austen. If Britain had a historical literary royal family, Jane Austen would be somewhere near the top of the line of succession. She gave us Mr. Darcy, sharp social satire, and enough wit to outlast centuries of literary trends. But Jane Austen's influence isn't just about romantic intrigue and marriage plots. It's about how she captured the nuances of British society. And where did some of this happen? Well, a lot of it happened. Not in some grand Georgian estate, no, but in a modest cottage in Chawton, Hampshire. It was here, where we're walking close by today, at a little wooden table in a tiny parlour, that she wrote Pride and Prejudice, Emma, and Sense and Sensibility, just in a small writing space. In the days prior to traffic out the window and a squadron of thumping Chinooks from the nearby RAF Odium. And clearly prior to the days somebody would peer through the ground floor window after visiting the local inn opposite her house, shouting, "Doris! Doris! There's Jane Austen! Bring your iPhone, I think I can see her writing a masterpiece at a small wooden desk over there." Jane Austen's world might seem quaint now. Grand balls, letter writing, and a concerning lack of Wi-Fi, but the themes she tackled, class, love, ambition, self-respect, they're all as relevant as ever. Sure, she didn't end up with fast theme rides to celebrate her literary life at Universal Orlando like J.K. Rowling can boast, but I'm not sure she'd have appreciated the Marianne Dashwood water rapids or overpriced Pemberley punch anyway. So if you find yourself in Hampshire, in a place called Chawton, that's where you'll find her home, pointed out by half a dozen brown tourist signs. You can go in the house too if your shoes are clean, and it's a reminder that genius doesn't need grandeur, just a concentrated mind, a little ink, some peace and quiet, and a lot of tea. No Garibaldis, I'm afraid. Jonathan Dodson Carr didn't invent those until 44 years after Jane's rather premature death. And now you know. You still won't escape from my Jane Austen story. That is to come. Oh, Neil, I thought that may have got us off the hook. Thank you for your amazing letters of late. That's what truly is the driving spirit of this show. There really isn't another photography podcast like it, which is quite a bold statement, I know, but it's something I think I can say safely. And it's down really to the wonderful writing that you share, the adventures near and far that you tell me about, the pictures that often go with these stories as well. Thank you so much for all of your letters. And if you have a picture or a letter to send in, and are gently nudged by anything you hear today, send to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. Right, letters. We'll start with this one from our friend Ewan McNeil, who has some thoughts about glass. And no, I'm not talking about the glass in our lens, but the glass as in the platform to show your work, and perhaps an alternative to platforms like, I don't know, Instagram, perhaps. And the reason I think this is an important letter is that I've had more than the odd cursory chat of late, or letters actually, with or from fellow photographers about the different platforms out there for sharing your work. Because it seems that some people are having some thoughts about Instagram and Facebook for all manner of reasons. And let's not shy away from this. Some of them are political. Some of them are about privacy. And some of them are the old chestnuts of how the algorithm serves up more stuff that you don't want rather than the stuff that you really did want. And other discussions in between. Now, I will just say at Photo Walk Towers, we do, of course, have an Instagram account, and we're on Facebook. And even though I share some of the concerns mooted of late about these platforms in terms of the changes in moderation and privacy, I don't see that changing our memberships right now, that is. Although I do watch on with a raised eyebrow. In Sean Tucker's chat with me about social platforms recently, he had some interesting takes on Instagram and social, and I'll play that in a moment as an excerpt. And of course, that's the whole thing about getting your work seen and using a platform that was first to market, isn't it? Coca-Cola, for instance, they thrived because they entered early, they built recognition and so on. What's that thing about being first as opposed to best? When was the last time you were in a pub and ordered I'll have a Malibu and Panda Cola, please? Not that you look like somebody who drinks Malibu, but you know what I mean. But I think this letter from Ewan McNeil, is a great place to continue this discussion, because I'm hoping to hear from you as well. About glass are my reasons for joining, says Ewan. They're perhaps not applicable to everybody, but here we go. Apart from the ubiquitous and almost obligatory use of WhatsApp, I consume very little social media, says Ewan. I think it's changing and becoming more intense and unpredictable as an experience, which really doesn't suit me personally. And I tend to feel my head is scrambled after just a few minutes looking at either Facebook or Instagram. I suspect a lot of us feel that way. For me, I want to be more conscious and have more control over what I take in. I'm dyslexic and autistic, which means that I tend to take in more detail than most people visually. So I find the barrages of adverts and automatically playing videos far too much sensory input on social media. I still remain a member of a few Facebook groups for specific purposes, but I access them from my desktop computer rather than my phone. So, in joining Glass, I wasn't actually looking for a replacement for a pre-existing social media platform or platforms that I'm a part of, but rather a place where I could curate or organise and share my work as an alternative to setting up my own website or blog. I like that the work I post on Glass is not solely accessible to subscribers of the platform, but can be viewed externally by those I choose to share the link with. Although it's also great that this is not automatic and you have a choice whether to make your images more widely available or just available to members of Glass. It was also important to me that the platform is built around working well from my desktop computer and not just a mobile. Now this one, Ewan, I entirely share. I don't choose to use the mobile app for Glass, says Ewan. I prefer my engagement with photography to be a more conscious process. And as I have a good quality, larger monitor, why not use it in preference to a teeny tiny phone screen? I have not yet made much use of commenting on others' photos and trying to build connections, but find the interface really helpful in terms of looking at and exploring other people's work along themes that I'm interested in. I select rather than what the computer spits at you. From the comments I have read, some people maybe feel free to be more open and vulnerable about their reasons for their photography, and the comments, they all seem respectful. The URL, says Ewan, for your individual Glass landing pages can be also really short and easy to remember, which I like. And I will, by the way, share Ewan's, which is glass.photo/Ewan. Early adopter there, Ewan, I think. Glass also seems reasonably priced for what you get, and you can actually email the people who make the platform with your ideas and comments. Now, I'll come back to the charging element of it in a moment, but I do see advantages for this. Finally, says Ewan, I'm not comfortable with the current political direction Meta's taking, and I much prefer the ethos of Glass. Regards, Ewan. So, first up, in case you're not familiar with how the platform charges, I did click on to see how much it would cost me to set up a profile, and it's a cent short of $40 for each year. So setting aside the facets of algorithms and adverts and stuff, as far as I'm thinking about this and looking at Ewan's and others' excitement about Glass, it does seem to be tailored for photographers, and I think the charging aspect of it probably helps as well. You're not going to get people that just steam in and troll, because there's much more of an investment in the platform. So I like that. It's not just about scrolling around for quick entertainment, and I think that's attractive. Perhaps it's a little bit like what Insta used to be, but it definitely means your work will likely receive more meaningful engagement, as Ewan is finding. More appreciation from a professional or enthusiast community rather than those fleeting likes. Instagram, on the other hand, it does cater to a broader audience, doesn't it? And it's driven by trends and reels and casual browsing, but there is an advantage to that in terms of business and marketing. I actually think both have an important place in this discussion. I think putting aside the latest debate over Meta for the other reasons, as a photography platform, I still think there's a value to it, to showing your work. But thank you, Ewan, for your very considered thoughts about Glass. I'd be interested to hear, and I know a few of you have now started using Glass. I'd be interested to know your thoughts, your opinions, your experience so far in using, it's not new, I know, but using a new-ish platform. Let's take a few words from Sean Tucker, as I said, the philosophical YouTuber, on the subject of feeding the machine and the algorithm.
These social media platforms that we use to share our work, they're a gift, because we get to make something and share it with somebody on the other side of the world, potentially within seconds. That's the first time in human history that's happened. That's amazing. Yeah. That is a gift. But they're companies who are businesses making money. They don't actually care about us as individuals, and they care about their shareholders and making a profit. And so they are going to tweak and turn their algorithm anytime they think they can make even a fraction more profit. And they're not considering how that affects us down the chain. And if we want to use their platforms for free, as we're doing, then unfortunately it's by their rules. And you have to decide as an artist what's important to you. For me, I'm doing it all wrong. Like I make work that isn't algorithm friendly, but it's the work I want to make. And I'm just hoping that the right audience thinks that's enough to keep up with on purpose as well. I think you have to put that algorithm conversation in the right box in your head. You know it's there. You know that it will favor some work over others, but you have to decide first what's the important work you want to make and factor that in. And maybe you do like a one-for-one approach. You know, maybe you do like, I'll do one for the algorithm, I'll do one for me. You know, like some actors or filmmakers do. Like, you know, yes, Chris true. Nolan goes, I'll do The Dark Knight, but then I'm going to do Interstellar. You know, yeah. He's like one for the fans, one for the studios, one for me that I really care about. I think if you just slavishly follow the algorithm, it's just a path to pain, because you can't keep up with the changes.
It's definitely a muddy walk. I'm not so sure I'm going to be going in Jane Austen's house. Have you got the Jane Austen story yet, Neil? No, don't worry. It's on its way. I wasn't worrying, Neil. I just was diarising a moment to pop upstairs and take a comfort break. Thank you very much. This algorithm thing, by the way, you know how I like to humanise stuff. Or, I never get this word out, I'll try. Anthropomorphise things. Yes, I've got it. You know how I like to do that. What do you think the algorithm would look like if it was a thing, a kind of creature? I have it sitting menacingly in a dark corner with a light growl. Talking of growling in the corner, Interesting to see a new kid turn up in the classroom of AI, isn't it, this week? ChatGPT now has competition for its admiring glances in the Chinese version of, it seems, called DeepSeek. And it apparently cost an absolute fraction of what ChatGPT cost to set up. And let's be honest, it does sound better as well. It sounds like it does do what it says on the tin. DeepSeek rather than what have you got? ChatGPT. It took me months to remember those three letters, and I like to think of myself as reasonably intelligent. And I did think, you know what? I might have a poke around to see what this looks like, since it's the most downloaded app in America at the moment. Only I can't use my login for an email address that's part of the family of, oh, looky, Google. Anyway, to lighter things, although all roads lead to something to do with social, it seems, just for a moment more at least, if you are a Flickr user, here's something new. Let me guide you to a closed group that Kelvin Brown has made, inspired by this podcast, encouraging you to share photos that match actually our monthly assignments, of which we'll come to later on in the show. It's very, very kind of Kelvin to do this. I really appreciate it, Kelvin. It's a nod to our community, and I'll tell you what, I'll include a link to it in from now on the show page, so that you can go and see the group as it begins to grow. It's very early stages at the moment, but if you're a Flickr user, there we go. We've got a group that Kelvin's looking after that you can become a part of. And while I talk about things to become a part of, the newsletter, yes. On the front page of the website, you'll find the newsletter as well. There's an invite to join the newsletter, which admittedly has been a little quiet since Crimbles. That's because I've been working on a few tweaks, including publishing some choice thoughts from our interview archive that will make a decent read as standalone pieces. So if you've not received the newsletter for the show, can I get into this woodland here? Oh no, there's a gate. I walked about a quarter of a mile to this gate thinking, oh, that's nice, because you can hear the bird song here, can't you? Listen to this. It'll go quiet now. This would have been lovely. See, that's what I like about Almansratten, if I've pronounced that correctly, in the Nordic countries, and Scotland, that right to roam. Quarter mile back then, Neil, yes. Yeah, so if you've not received the newsletter for the show, then you'll find a link on the front page of the photowalk.show website, and come and join us. I bet you Jane Austen would have been able to walk through that gate, but it didn't have a lock on it, that's for sure. All right, ahead of the first part of my conversation with Tracey Halladay today, here's one from another Tracey. What, two, Neil? You mean there's more than one in the world? Yes, apparently. This was a letter after I asked you to tell me about your plans for 2025, and I did get a few tentative responses, almost like if you told me you'd need to stick to it. It was a kind of, ooh, am I sure I want to send Neil this? If I do, I'm going to have to go and do the stuff I tell him I'm doing. All the same, it's good to have a few of your plans, so it's not too late. If you are thinking about projects for 2025 and you'd like to share them with me and our audience, then I'd love to hear from you. Send your thoughts, your plans to stories@photowalk.show. So from Tracy Ainsley, who wrote in at the tail end of last year. I just discovered your show at the start of December 2024. Oh, so you are quite recent, Tracey. Now, normally, I listen to podcasts in bed and fall asleep, but yours seems to be too interesting. Tracey, you're too kind and too generous. You'll have to learn to lightly offend or insult me first, of course. I am, after all, English, and I expect a good taking down a peg or three. It's how we're taught in school, or at least it was how I was. Our friend, Lynn of the Fraser clan, who you hear often about or from, she tells me that I have a voice like anaesthetic or something like that. And that's when she's feeling charitable. I suspect, Tracey, she is in cahoots with my boys, because that's the sort of thing that they would say, "Oh, Dad, you're droning on again." And then they'd pretend to fall asleep in their lasagna or something. Anyway, says Tracey, a question posed. What's your plans for 2025? Lots, I thought. And look at this list. A lighthouse keeper's cottage for my 60th in January. February, fly off to Dubai for a few days, then off to Melbourne to meet relatives I've never met and see my guilty pleasure, Ramsay Street for neighbours. And then just a 10-day road trip around Tasmania. Blimey, Tracey, you don't do things in halves. Lots of photos to take, she said. This is perfect, I said. I thought, where can I sign up for this? And then I read on. A few days later, says Tracey, I found myself in the high dependency unit with a DVT, which broke into clots in both lungs, one straining heart. I tested positive for flu and then got hospital-acquired pneumonia and strep for good measure. Big holiday, cancelled. I felt a bit sorry for myself. However, I will manage the lighthouse trip. I've listened to a few more episodes of your podcasts. Who needs exotic holidays anyway? I'm now inspired just to get back out for walks, camera in hand, and hopefully will enter some of your assignments. All is not lost. I've been out to Snapper Footbridge, I like, which is going to be replaced for a new fancy estate that's being built. Anyway, hey-ho, here I go. Look forward to this week's listen. You'll find me under @WPC Thunderbird, which I will link to, of course, on Instagram. Thanks for giving me something to look forward to from Tracey. Well, Tracey, I shall share that Insta link on the show page today, and I hope you're well on the way to full recovery very, very soon. I have to say, the idea of staying in a lighthouse keeper's cottage, sounds idyllic. That is on my list of I would love tos. Although I do fancy the idea of staying in the actual lighthouse. Something like the one we talked about a few weeks ago when I talked to Jack Lowe of the Lifeboat Station Project. Remember, he talked about Bishop's Rock Lighthouse, which is it just off the Isle of Man or Scilly? Anyway, it's out to sea on a rock on what was once, I think, I think it was the smallest inhabited island in the world. It's been replaced, I'm pretty sure, by a house somewhere off the coast, or is it the east coast of America land? Anyway, I saw this lighthouse as the perfect retreat. There are a couple actually in Norway, actual lighthouses you can stay in very, very remote places, but you lot would have to come with me, because frankly, on my own, well, you know what my imagination is like. I'd be imagining stuff that goes bump in the night within seconds of arrival, I'm sure. I've seen John Carpenter's movie, The Fog, and it doesn't end well. Oh, Neil, that film, really? Yes, The Fog, it still gives me the heebie-jeebies. I've done a couple of commercial jobs this week. One of the ones I did right at the head of the week is I went to, it's an old house that I'm going to start photographing in a bit more regularly, I hope. And I rocked up really just to do a walk around the place and take some photographs and have a chat with one of the owners. And we were standing in a room, and they said, yeah, you're standing in a room that used to be the operating theatre during the First World War. I said, what? And from that moment on, those rooms that surrounded it, because they were all operating rooms, not now, they're panelled rooms being readied for a sort of hotel venue, but the moment I knew what these rooms used to be, it was, I don't know. Please don't leave me in here on my own. I don't want to be here. Anyway, Tracey, I'm looking forward to more of your letters, because once you've sent one in, you are part of the club of letter writers. So to my guest this week, Tracey Halladay. And I'm a little aware of the fact that there's not completely non-tenuous links when it comes to the subject of health. Were there too many negatives cancelling each other out there? So forgive me if the letter at this point seems, or the one that I've just read, seems a bit mistimed or even clumsy, but I do prefer to think of both stories as those that emerge from the other side with a clearer, and full pun intended now, picture of how amazing this world is to photograph and how incredible it is to have the privilege of photographing it. With Tracey Halladay, as you're about to find out, this is a story about literally waking up to a new dawn, and literally is a literally overused word, I know. It's about discovering, despite adversity, how photography can become not just a mental health tonic, but a complete life-changing experience. So we have a story today that really does underline that all of us, every one of us, and I'll include my other listener here, even though you know they're sometimes a little grumpy behind the lens, that every one of us has an opportunity where photography can change our lives. Sometimes, not by a lot, sometimes it's just a little bit. Sometimes it's through being entirely immersed by a new appreciation for the world. And what I love about this story is that we round a corner to embrace helping others pursue an incredible life of curiosity behind the shutter button too. All will make sense, I promise. 2 parts. As always, here's part 1 of my conversation of 2 parts today with the photographer, Tracey Halladay. Tracey, on your website, front page on your website, there are 7 words that they catch my eye immediately. Wandering the world with eyes wide open. You live in a beautiful part of the world, actually, British Columbia, so not a bad canvas on which to walk with your eyes wide open, is it really?
It's not at all. So I live in a little town in the very southeast corner of British Columbia. I've actually lived here for over 40 years, and I literally walk 20 feet and I'm in the bush. Right out my back door. And there's trails that go from one end of the town to the other. We had dogs for many years, and I spent a lot of time walking those trails with the dogs. And it'll take me down to a little creek that runs through the middle of town that, with the cold weather this past week, has frozen over, and just before it closes up, it goes a beautiful turquoise blue. Yeah, there's just mountains. My favorite mountain is off to the left, and the sun comes up and turns it pink, and it's just beautiful.
Are you able to walk for miles and miles without seeing somebody?
It depends what direction you go. But yes, there's 2 valleys in this area, which the one that's a little further away, we spent so much time in it, like right from being a teenager, and we'd camp back there, and you'd go for 2 weeks camping and see nobody.
Where do I sign up, Tracey? Send me the form.
Yeah, you just find a little trail and wander down it, and eventually the only thing you're going to run into possibly is a bear.
Well, now, if you'd have read my questions on page 2, there would be a question. There would be a question about the grizzly bear. It's I think it's becoming an in-joke, actually, on this show, that if I talk to Australians, I'm bound to ask about the sharks. If I talk to... I probably would ask about the snakes as well. Yeah, the Australians get the snakes and the sharks, as do... and I don't have the privilege to talk too often to photographers on the continent of Africa, but they'd probably get a snake question as well. In Canada, has to be bears. Do you carry your bear spray or whatever it is you're supposed to carry?
I wear bear spray 24/7 if I'm out in the bush.
Right. Oh, you wear it? I thought it was something you sprayed at them.
Well, you spray it at them if they come close to you.
Yeah.
But I have a belt that I wear around my waist.
Yeah.
And when I go anywhere, that's the first thing I put on when I get out of the vehicle, because it will work against moose and cougars and stuff like that as well.
Moose, of course, I used to look at them as, oh, look at the moose. But they can be a bit grumpy, can't they?
A cow moose with a calf is scarier than running into a bear.
Really?
Because, yeah, I've been charged while I was sitting in a vehicle. They literally, it sounds like a growl, and they'll stomp their legs and start coming towards you. And I started my truck and drove away quickly because she was coming.
Is there a rule? I mean, I know, speaking to wildlife photographers, they say, right, if you've got a big cat, whatever you do, don't turn around and run. You've just got to face it and stare it out and hopefully and make yourself as big as you can. I think you do that with bears as well, don't you? Big and scary. But with a moose?
If it's a cow moose with a calf, you just want to back away slowly and calmly and talk quietly and get out of there. People have had a lot of times in the winter, the moose will use the snowmobile trail to get around on. And we have friends who've had the front of their snowmobile like wrecked by a moose coming and stomping on it.
You know that bit I said just about only 2-3 minutes ago where I said, where do I sign up?
You're retracting your application.
No. I'm only signing up if you're with me because you seem to know what you're doing. Let's go right back. Dad introduced you to photography. It sounds too like your parents were great explorers. Certainly they liked the Great Lakes, didn't they? Which is where you spent a lot of your childhood. This is sounding like something out of a famous Five book. It really is.
We used to go and stay. My parents had friends who had a resort. I can't remember the name of where it was or anything, but there was Twin Lakes, and that's all I remember is you would go to the left and you'd be at one lake, and you'd go to the right and you'd be at the other lake. And they had dogs who were taken by wolves, and we'd run into black bears and spent a lot of time berry picking. And the one guy had a pet crow or raven or whatever that would come and sit on his shoulder and he'd talk to it. It was a pretty cool childhood.
Is that that's where the photography starts, isn't it?
That's where it started. I had a little one of those little flat cameras with the flash bulb on top that you pop on and off.
It was like the cube one that you.
Yeah.
Oh,
like a 110 or something.
Such childhood memories of that. I just remember Dad saying, "Where's the flashes? They're in the cupboard, John. Which cupboard?"
You'd shake them out of the box and get one and pop it on. And...
That's right. Oh God, what a memory.
Yeah.
But I like this. You were bought a Pentax film camera as your graduation gift. Now, it wasn't quite my graduation gift. I'm not half as bright as you, but I had a similar experience. I got a Nikon, a Nikon, or Nikon, or however you want to pronounce it around the world, camera as a Christmas present, which was completely unexpected. I was totally thrilled with it. And I think that sort of supercharged, for a while, my interest in photography, although it dissipated a bit, and I've come back to it later on in life. But yours was a graduation gift.
And I still have it. I actually just shot a roll of black and white film and dropped it off with a friend. She's going to roll it back and shoot over top of my images. We're going to do a double exposure and see what comes out of it.
And you, I don't suppose, well, you're not going to say, look, I shot frame 1, I was there, frame 2, this is going to be a complete surprise.
It's going to be a complete surprise, especially because I shot my roll over a period of 2 years. So I have no idea what's on there at all.
That's a fantastic idea. There are two very distinctive parts of the why in your story, pre and post 2014. Let's talk about, let's go pre 2014 first of all. What were you doing with your photography? Not
very much. I had taken my first photography workshop, I think around 2012, because it was starting to get back into it and be interested in learning more than just shooting in auto. The first photography workshop did not go well. My battery in my camera died about 5 minutes after we went out into the field. So I compromised and shot with an iPhone 4, which is what I had. And they say the best camera is the one you have with you. So I made it work. And then 2014 is when I was diagnosed suddenly with kidney failure. I started dialysis within 24 hours. I had to travel, I had surgery, had a port put in my chest, and that changed things a lot.
It came out of the blue, didn't it? And I know your mother suffered from kidney problems, but it wasn't necessarily hereditary, was it? Or wasn't thought to be. So it was.
It wasn't thought to be.
Complete surprise.
And I think, in all honesty, if my mom hadn't gone through what she did, I probably would have gone off the deep end because it was such a shock. My dad had entered hospice 2 days before I was told about it too. Oof. So I actually emailed him to tell him what was going on because I couldn't bring myself to tell him in person. You know, like I just told him, I'll be okay. Don't worry about me. I'll be okay. So I managed to get up and see him. I had to get a ride he lived 6 hours from me and I couldn't drive because I was still healing from having the port put in. So a couple of friends came together and got me up there, and I managed to spend a few days with him, and he was gone within a month.
So dialysis started, which you did for 4 years, didn't you? with all
Yep.
this happening. And the transplant, I think, was looking unlikely, wasn't it? And you were resigning yourself to a darker thought of an end. But then the transplant suddenly did occur. During this 4 years, were you photographing at all? Was there anything about the photography that was not so much taking your mind off things, but certainly mentally helping you?
For the first couple of years, no. Like, I was off work for 2 years. I had surgery again to do a different form of dialysis. And when I had that surgery, I had to travel back and forth every single week, 6 hours round trip to go and get checked. And then you have to do training and everything. And when I was going back and forth, I started taking detours and back roads. And that was part of just, I needed to clear my head. It was so much to deal with. And when I started doing all the side trips, I had bought myself, after my dad passed away, he had left me some money. And I had sat down and bought myself a Nikon D7000 and a big lens and a little lens and a macro lens, and kind of put a whole kit together. And so I started taking it with me when I was doing the back roads, going back and forth.
Yeah.
And just to stop and take some time for me instead of being so focused on going there, getting back. It's like, no, I need to take some time and just slow down and try and heal, I guess, basically, right? So I photographed throughout a period of 3 months. I photographed an osprey family that was in a nest along the side of the road and watched the chicks go from barely popping over the top of the nest to one of my favorite photos is I have the two of them in the nest. There's no parent there at the time. And the ones, they're starting to flap their wings to get ready to fly.
Yeah.
And the one's flapping and the other one's like looking like this. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Did you not feel like being underneath the nest saying, I'm here, I'll catch you if you fall?
Yeah. That was probably where things kind of started rolling again.
So you started noticing the world.
Started noticing what was going on. And then for my 50th birthday, my daughter gifted me a workshop called October Gold. And it was held in Banff with 3 amazing photographers, one of who I was absolutely thrilled to meet because I'd followed his work for probably 20 years.
Who's that?
John Marriott. He actually just won at an award ceremony in London. He had a Lynx photo that won...
the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. We're lucky enough, actually. I shall go and see his work in this one, hopefully, because we're lucky that tour, that show tours, and it comes to it comes to our town right next to my favourite coffee shop.
Yeah, I saw it in Vancouver. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. It was in Vancouver or Victoria when I was there, and I made a point of going to go see it.
Yeah. So you were on this workshop with somebody who you very much admired and revered, if you like.
Yes. And the worst part of it is at that point, because it was late 2017, I was quite sick. And by the time I finished the workshop, because it's long days, I was doing 8 hours of dialysis at night. I cut myself short because we were night shooting and getting up early, and I left that workshop and things went very quickly downhill from there. Oh. I stopped at a friend's place to spend the night, and my ankles and legs were hugely swollen because so much fluid on me, and it was not a good thing. I wish I could do that workshop over again because I would probably get so much more out of it now.
So you were at this stage really quite ill. It's almost 4 years to the day, though, where you think, this isn't happening, I'm not receiving a transplant. And then out of the blue comes a phone call, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was 4 years to the day that I was told I was in kidney failure. On the exact same thing, October 1st, I got a phone call that they had a kidney for me from a deceased donor. It was a high-risk kidney. At the time, they were doing quite a few transplants in BC because there was an opioid crisis and there was a lot of deaths. So I thought about it and I thought, you know what? I can take medicine if I happen to get hepatitis or HIV. There is nothing that's going to cure what's happening to me now other than a kidney.
And that's what a high-risk kidney means?
Yeah, because it was suspected from a drug overdose.
Right.
But no, I accepted and had to literally pack and leave and fly to Vancouver.
Something very special happened the morning after this surgery, which was a success. In terms of how you thought about photography, talk me through that feeling, because you'll do it so much better than I will. What it meant for your photography and also for your life.
Yeah. Take two. It's like when they do the filming of the movies and the TV show and the little thing comes out.
Clapperboard comes up, take two.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I woke up very early for me. Like I'd been sleeping 12, 14 hours a day, just being so sick. And I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I got out of my bed and went and sat in the chair by the window and watched the sun come up. And the view from my hospital room, everything was red and gold and orange, all the trees. And, you get that little bit of dew because it's a bit cooler in the morning. And it was just absolutely beautiful. I have a picture that I took with my cell phone. And it was so special because it was just, I was only in the hospital after my surgery for 6 days, which is a pretty major surgery. So it was pretty amazing. Yeah. And I went and I was staying with my nephew. And initially I had to take a cab to the hospital twice a week for checkups. And then I started walking, and he lived in an area of Vancouver where it's all heritage homes. And they have plaques out front telling you about the homes and what their former uses were and stuff like that. And just the landscaping is stumps and big rocks. And because I get quite tired, I'd stop and sit. And just the trees overlap on both sides of the streets and would create like a little umbrella of colored leaves over top of you. So it was just, the air would be glowing as you're going through all this with the sun out. It was just beautiful. And as I started walking this road back and forth, I started realizing that I was just seeing things that I'd never noticed before. Your photography had completely changed, hadn't it? Your eye had completely changed. My eye had completely changed. We took a ferry over to a little island called Bowen Island. And that day I walked 11.4 kilometers. I'd set a goal to walk 10 before I left Vancouver. And I went 11.4. I was so tired and my feet were sore, but I did it. And just sitting in the ferns and the moss and just the ocean sounds and everything. It was amazing. I've got so many of your projects that I want to talk about, but there is another twist and turn which I think is important to your story. And that is a few years into your recovery, you suffered injuries to both your legs. And that became a battle again with depression, which is not surprising because here you are with take two and you're thinking, well, look, I've got take two. And what are you throwing at me now? It was pretty bad. The meniscus wasn't so bad. It was frustrating and painful, but I still walked my dog twice a day, did our little loop up through the trails above my house. And I still felt like I could get out there and I was healing and it was going to be okay. And when the two tendons snapped in my other ankle, it was not good because it did limit the amount of mobility I had immensely because I'd kind of compensated for one injury and now it's on the other side. And it was just, the only way to describe it was like somebody pulled the rug out from underneath me and said, no, this is it. You're stuck. You can't go do this stuff. And that's when I started driving the back roads, and especially in storms and stormy weather, because just sitting and listening to the wind and the rain and watching the clouds and stuff around the mountains, even though I was sad and it was, I'd cry a lot of the time, but it was also, I think, in a sense, bringing me peace. Just being there by myself, like nobody else around, right? It's interesting that the first part of the story was driving the back roads, wasn't it? And then this seems to be a repeat of that and giving you that opportunity to see the world. It was difficult, but I think as I started photographing, and I was using like a long lens and zooming in on the details, like little trees and the mist and stuff. But when I started putting it all together and I realized like it was basically expressing how I was feeling. And then when I started putting the words down, initially it was just kind of describing weather and weather systems and how it all works, but then it wasn't. And once the words started coming out, I think is when I started realizing that it's okay, like it's going to be okay. This is through the mist, isn't it? Yeah. And I'm still working on it. I was really sure that there was only going to be 3 chapters. I've done 2.
What goes into each chapter then?
So the first chapter was kind of the describing the weather and
Yeah.
weather systems. And the second chapter is when things kind of went downhill a bit more. And it starts off with a very, very dark image. And the words that went with it just said, "Here I go, down into the darkness." And that was where I was starting to realize that I needed help. Like, I went and saw my doctor and asked for antidepressants because I realized that where I was going was not helping me at all. It wasn't helping me. It wasn't helping the people around me. And it's a very hard thing to do, to admit to yourself as well as to other people that you're not capable of healing yourself. And I think, like, for me, it was, I had only ever had to do that once before, and that was right after I was diagnosed with kidney failure. But at this point, it was just basically, I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to. Like, it's awful. Depression is a horrible thing. And I think that it's often not very well understood.
Not at all.
And
not at all.
No, it's not. And I think too, like, for people who are suffering from it, like, you get a lot of people just smile, smile, come do this or whatever. It's like, no, there's something, doesn't work that way. Something's off in your body.
I was watching an interesting YouTube video the other day about antidepressants and walking in the countryside. And I suppose, unscientific suggestion was that walking in the countryside can ease anxiety, depression, stress, and for some it has benefits comparable to antidepressants. For some people, I think, is the caveat. I'm interested to know what your thoughts are, as you are somebody who embraces the countryside for mindfulness.
So I would say it does absolutely help. For me, anyways. I know that I get to the point even now where things get really busy and hectic and you're running around and it's like, I just need to go out in the bush.
Yeah.
Just take a drive, park somewhere, even if I don't get out. I used to go after work some nights and just roll down the window and sit by the river. And just the sound of the birds and the river and everything would just kind of calm you down. And, it slows your breathing, slows your heart rate, makes you relax. Like, I think it's definitely a big part for me of how I got to where I am now. And I've realized that.
You are now able to make your journeys and record your stories as you wish, aren't you?
I am. And part of that, like, over the last year, I've realized that keeping all of this inside is not good. It's not beneficial. It's hard to be vulnerable, and it's hard to share some things just because I don't want to seem like I'm complaining. I try not to. Like, there's people, I always say there's somebody somewhere who has it way worse than I do. And I think that's a really good way to look at life, is that no matter what's being thrown at you, there's somebody somewhere else who's in a worse situation.
My thanks to Tracey Halladay, who returns shortly. It's an incredible story today, and I'm so pleased we had the opportunity to talk with her. Did you hear that bang? If Barney was with me, he'd be off by now. He'd be, what? I'm not hanging around for this. What's going on? I think there's some rabbits that should probably be running a tad quicker than they are right now. We should really have a few letters into the show with pictures now, since we haven't yet. And this is one which leans in nicely to the second letter today. Plans for 2025, that was. It's from Chris Smith. Roll in, though, the first-time writer jingle, one that we don't have, that we should. Chris says, so, as the new year is now in week 4 and February is looming, so this is one of the most recent letters, I've started back listening to the podcast. I lapsed, I'm afraid, in both listening and with my photography due to life and work and family and my mental health, all causing me to make the excuse of not using photography and the podcast to do what it does, which is, give me space to what I call put my head on straight. I've listened to the Claire Thomas episode and the Ted Forbes one, and have enjoyed trying to find some inspiration and recognition from them, and your chat about the why of photography and why it's important. And because of this, I decided to waffle on in the form of an email to the show and you. Chris, my friend, it is never waffle. My main interest is nature and wildlife and anything that isn't too people-based, as nature doesn't complain about not capturing its best side. And I've never had a duck at least say, delete that one, would you? I look too large in that one. I tell you what, Chris, you'll also never get a duck come back and ask you, have you got more from the, the corner of the lake on the other side? Have you got any more of those ones? I love the challenge of trying to capture nature and see some of the things that we might miss if I didn't sit and watch the world go by all day. Although I say I don't generally photograph people, I have actually ventured into taking pictures for a local theatre group to publicise their shows, and I photograph for a few local charities at their events too. I enjoy this as I see it as a similar style to wildlife photography, having to be ready to capture the moment, read the lighting, anticipate the scene. Taking pictures in the darkness of an auditorium, watching a moment unfold. See, at first I thought, Chris, no, this is not at all like wildlife photography, what you're describing. But yes, I do understand what you're saying there. But you really can't beat being outside with your camera and a pack of biscuits. Big, chunky butter shortbread, sorry, no Garibaldi's, Neil. It really does help slow my world down again and means I can go back a little better equipped to deal with life. I have hundreds of images, if not thousands, as I'm sure most nature photographers do. I do have one image, though, that I'm particularly proud of, and I'd like to share it with you. One that's my go-to image, that if somebody was to ask, do you have a picture, Chris, that defines your photographic style, I'll be able to show it in response. For me, this is my picture. It's not pin sharp, and I think you use a phrase about perfect imperfections, and it's definitely that. The lighting was terrible. The original image needed to be cropped and straightened, and I've dropped the colour, which actually, Chris, I think accentuates the drama. There is some drama in this photograph. And I'll pop it on the show page. Anyway, says Chris, this shot was a once-in-a-lifetime capture, and I think deserved just a little digital TLC. Hope you enjoy it, and I hope you continue to find new and interesting guests to keep us all inspired and listening. Chris, I will do my best, he says, sounding like he's doing the Cub Scout promise. Cubs, do your best. Oh, Kayla, we'll do our best. Do you remember those days? I still have my Cub Scout hat, actually. It's probably one of my oldest childhood clothing reminders, maybe the only one. But Chris, thank you. Spot on, really spot on. I wonder, if we were asked, it'd be a good challenge, actually, what our This Is Me picture would be, what we might choose. What would that photograph be for you? So, well, if you get a chance to send it, stories@photowalk.show. This could be I think it could be a new thing for 2025. Stories@photowalk.show. Send your picture in. What is your This Is Me photograph? I appreciate that it might not be easy to find just one, but I think I have one. I definitely think I have one. I'll share that one day. Are you going to share your Jane Austen story yet? No, I will do. I'm coming to that, I promise. But thank you, Chris, for your picture. It's on the show page. It's 9 animal friends in nature, playing what looks like a staring match with you. You'll have to go to the show page to see what Chris thinks of as his go-to picture that says, "This is me." But as always, here we go. I'm trying to imagine what these majestic beasts are thinking as they stare right at you, Chris, as you're holding your camera. I reckon they'll say, do you think he's using f8? Is that f8? Or maybe it's a bit more shallow. What's that? Is it a 600 millimeter? No, I think you'll find that's a 70 to 200. No, I'm sure it's a 600. What do you reckon he shoots anyway? Canon? Nikon? Fuji? Anyway, come on, you lot. I think he's got it. Let's go find some milkweed. I saw some just over the ridge. Might even find a beach to nibble on. Oh, by the way, Chris, I love the name of your website, beardynature.co.uk. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Jane Austen, before I forget to recount the tale, the Jane Austen story that I have, comes from shooting a wedding years ago, years and years and years, and possibly more years ago, really near the start of my adventure of shooting weddings. I mean, I've shot 1,000 across 20 years. This, I'm sure, would have been the very early days. Yes, Neil, we get the idea. I was at a place called Great Fosters. Now, Great Fosters is a beautiful, old, very old English country estate. And it's a very exclusive hotel as well, beautiful hotel. And it also hosts weddings, aspirational weddings. Is that what we call them? Anyway, there's lots of staircases there. They're all wood panelled, dark wood panelled, Tudor kind of stairwells. There's a labyrinth of them actually. But there's one in particular that has beautiful window light that falls onto the, I think I remember them as it being a very sumptuous, rich red carpet leading down the steps, or the stairs rather. I think this is possibly the stairwell. Yes, it is. That came from the what they would have used as a bridal suite. So it's a stairwell I'd photographed on a couple of times, and there were some curtains there, and these curtains were always open. But this particular day, there was so much light coming in onto the stairwell that I thought, I need to just take a bit of light away from this situation. I need to be able to do something that's a bit dark, a bit moody. So I went to the curtains, and I grabbed the left and the right. I pulled them together really, really quickly, to the absolute horror of everybody that was with me at that moment, because I wanted to photograph the bride and groom with just a little bit of light falling on them. And I'd brought these curtains together for somebody to say to me, "You haven't just closed those curtains, have you?" Or something like that. And I said, yeah, what's the problem? Look at the sign just to the right of them. And the sign was that these were curtains. I think they were either owned or I think made by Jane Austen. They were treasured heirlooms. Don't know what they were doing in this hotel, but they were in the hotel. Treasured heirlooms, not to be touched at all. And I just pulled them together like they were just a set of curtains from IKEA. They were taken away only about a month later, never seen again. I'm pretty sure it was my fault. Was that your story, Neil? Was that it? Well, it was funny at the time. Right. Oh, can we get through this gate? There we go, we can. Right. Oh, it takes us towards the road. Well, that's not quite so nice, is it? Should we trace back? Yeah, let's go back the way we came, because it's quieter, just next to the woodland. As the 31st of the month is a Friday, that being today, if you're listening to this on the day of release. Let's close this gate, hold on. The January assignment is hanging in there. It is, isn't it? Just for one more week. Now, I think it's pretty clear what the challenge is for this month. It's now officially the most subscribed to assignment of the lot in terms of entry numbers. It's going to hit, if it hasn't already, the 100 level. And I think rather than play the piece with Ted Forbes in again, Ted, of course, set the assignment. Let me just remind you of his words myself. The one-word assignment for this month is the colour red. Ted is looking for a picture where the weight of the colour carries perhaps a narrative. Ted picked red because our eyes are so tuned to that colour. So his assignment is, for one more week, to shoot a picture incorporating the colour red in some way, shape or form. Try and use it as contrast. You could, he suggested, use it as something that's small in the composition but carries a lot of visual weight. So over to you. Send your entries to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide, please, if you can resize. And don't worry if you can't, I will do the heavy lifting. Avoid sending through your phone if you're sending pictures, because that sometimes, of late in particular, squishes a picture so small you can hardly see it. One picture each, no borders, no watermarks, but do include any links that we can use to link back to your work, your website, your socials and so on. Now, I think this challenge this month has become a place to really find inspiration in terms of creative storytelling and composition. And a journey sometimes, a journey into the abstract as well. And even though it's going to be ridiculously hard, there will be a picture that gets awarded the coveted, perhaps not so coveted, famous, not so famous flask. Suitable for hot and cold drinks, sent wherever we need to, anywhere in the world. And it's really nice to see where these are popping up, because we've sent them for some of the letters that we've read out on the show on occasion. On the show page today, then, a number of images from Mark Christensen, whose show flask arrived a couple of weeks ago. The famous, not so famous flask on tour in various places in America land. My wife and I, said Mark, went out for the weekend to celebrate our 29th anniversary. And she joined me in finding fun places to photograph the flask that you sent me. I'm sure she was absolutely delighted, Mark. And yes, here they are. Fantastic. I'll put them on the show page. It's your flask has been to the beach. And it's been to the beach at sunset, or is that sunrise? It looks like it went perhaps to a classic car show. It went train spotting. It's been to play softball. And it even went to an In-N-Out burger joint. So thank you for that. I'm glad you're looking after the flask. I'll put those touring pictures on the show page today. I'm pleased to see that you're showing its Californian hospitality. And as for the In-N-Out burger, make mine a double-double, please. Ooh, that looks good. It really does. We'll return to my guest, Tracey Halladay, very soon. But before that, it's been a little while, but look here. A poem for the path has tiptoed into the show. We did a few of these towards, I think the last one we did must have been autumn last year, toward the middle of autumn. And I was, I suppose, resigned to think that it hadn't necessarily captured your imagination. The idea being that if your walk inspires you to think outside of only making a still photograph to celebrate it, but to pen some thoughts and words down too in the form of a poem, hence Poems from the Path. So this is from Xavier Shaver, who's in gator territory. I had 2 close shaves with these magnificent beasts, one in the Everglades last summer, and then this time last year, almost to the day actually, in the Gambia, I found myself sat next to a croc, not a gator of course, but a croc, stroking its tail, because the man from the healing pond said I should. Much to the amusement actually, and she's been mentioned already, of Lina the Fraser clan, who I think was waiting for a snappier end to the tail. So from Xavier, a poem from your walk, although he did write a short letter first that I'll read. Hi Neil, my name is Xavier and I'm from Louisiana in the US. I just wanted to tell you that I love your show and that you've helped me through a rough patch this year, suffering from depression, and I don't always feel motivated to take pictures every day. So hearing the stories from the people on the show has really helped me to see that my pictures don't have to be perfect. It seems to be a theme, doesn't it? Xavier. Was it Xavier? Xavier. You say tomato, I say tomato. And I'm really now learning to enjoy what I like doing without worrying what others think. Hallelujah is what I can say in response to that. My favourite way to take pictures is on a kayak. And at first I thought, that sounds fantastic. But Xavier, you're kayaking with the gators. Listen, I'm going to have sleepless nights now worrying about you. So every time you get home now, when you've been out in your kayak, could you give us a little call and say, it's all right, I've got home, I'm in one piece. Anyway, I love wildlife photography, says Xavier, and if I can get a bit closer to my subjects when I'm on the water, perfect. You just give yourself a boost and you just drift lightly towards them, and then you try not to move. I attach a picture of an alligator I came across at Toledo Bend Reservoir, since you've mentioned them on the podcast recently. When you say you boost a bit and you drift towards them, I don't know what lens you're using, but you look very, very, very close. I mean, I can see into its eye. I also attach a picture of the shore at Toledo Bend. It's very windy and quiet during the winter, and I like to sit on the shore and think. I write poems, and they help me to organise my thoughts and my feelings. And these pictures, as I say, they'll be on the show page today. Look at that gator. I know I'm going on about it, but tell me you're not slightly concerned. I wrote this poem, said Xavier, after my walk around the lake shore. I was thinking about how wondrous it is that we can sense the world around us in so many ways. Sight and sound and touch and taste. And this is what I came up with. And Xavier, I hope I can do your work justice here. This one is called Before Sound.
Before the spark of life, before the world was a blaze of green, there was the roaring sound of silence. Waves that could not be heard, a wind that could not be felt, a sight that could not be seen, a ground that could not be touched, a silent earth with an ecosystem of sound, adrift in a loud and unheard universe, patiently waiting, no eyes to witness its light, no words to describe its beauty, no ears to hear its call, no feet to touch its sand. This was our world before sound. One spark, one burning ember. Life gave the universe ears, a gift to itself, so it could hear its own song.
Xavier, thank you so much for your poem and for your very kind words at the tail end, which I'm being far too Englishly awkward to read out. Although, speaking of the tail end, one thing I do remember from my meeting with a croc last year, and while I'm thinking about Lynn of the Fraser clan just waiting with her camera, I was told, make sure, if you're sat with a croc, for whatever reason you might be, make sure the tail is towards you, because that way it can't suddenly thrash at you, knock you over and make you into a handbag, to which that irony is not lost. And if you're going to oddly decide you do need to stroke a crocodile, kids, don't try this at home. Choose to do so when it's had its food and is taking its afternoon siesta, and don't stroke beyond the middle section of its head. I mention this, I know, but when the chap whose job it was to look after these crocodiles at this generations, and so it's not a tourist thing, it's not a pond, is it? What's it called? Crocodile, I will call it a crocodile pond. It's a bit larger than a pond, not as large as a lake, that's been there in a healing capacity for generations and generations and generations. The chap whose job it is now to look after the crocs, he reckoned there was about 100 there. And he said to me, you'll be fine as long as it's been fed. And I fed them, he said. And for some reason, I just took his word and said, well, that's good enough for me. It's an encounter. Oh, Neil, are you going to mention something that I think you're going to mention? Yes, it's an encounter that I won't forget. Talking of encounters, nicely done, Neil. I have a couple of spaces still left on this April's Encounters. 2 days in London, spent working on and discussing our story-making skills. One of the things I'm particularly looking forward to, which I will be taking part in as well, is the surprise challenges that are being set. In fact, they're coming in at the moment by photographers who've been on this show over the last 4 years. I'm hoping for some decent names in there as well. Everybody's decent, but you know what I mean. It's much like the assignments that are a special part of this show, but these are going to be surprise challenges out of the hat, as it were, that will be a special part of Encounters. Nothing that's going to be impossible as a challenge, I promise you, but certainly something that you're not quite expecting, and that will gently nudge your curiosity up a spot. Designed if you like to stretch your curiosity. We have our 2 history tours as well as part of that, and we'll be producing a zine and a podcast feature. So it's sound and it's picture making, it's editorial in many ways, and there's an encounter in there as well for a story about a person or a place. I'm thoroughly looking forward to it. And if you'd like to join us, then Encounters, go to the Encounters tab on the website. all will be explained in further detail there. Right, part 2 then of my chat with Tracey Halladay. As I said right at the start, this is certainly a second part that takes the story in a different direction. Part 2 of my chat with Tracey Halladay.
Tracey, we've talked about your journey to get where you are today, the health story. I'd like to talk about your photography now, the birds around me. I'd like to talk about that project, and then I want to link it in a weird way with heavy metal. Allow me that in a moment, though. Tell me about the birds first of all.
So the birds I started during COVID because you couldn't really go anywhere. I had plans to travel and they were canceled. I canceled them because I didn't feel comfortable. They were saying, you could travel within your 3 or 4 hour radius or whatever it was. And it's like, no, I don't feel good about that. So I had put some bird feeders up and I started noticing the birds. And I would sit quietly, sometimes for quite a long period of time, and wait for them to come and just photograph them in the bird feeders in the little bush beside my deck. And as that project evolved, I went from shooting them there to capturing them in trees. My daughter lives about 2 hours away from me, and her climate is very different than here. Like when we were -17, she was -8. And she's got these...
Sorry, to me, living in my microclimate, -17, -8, they sound pretty similar to me.
There's a big difference once you've been at the -17.
I'm sure there is, yeah.
Yeah. So I would go to her place, and in the springtime and early summer, the one year, we watched probably over 24 hummingbirds.
Oh, beautiful.
At her feeders.
Amazing.
And it was crazy. And I don't get that. I have one that maybe comes for a while. So then I started with the hummingbirds. And then it became an evolution where it was like, okay, I don't want man-made objects in these. So now I have to try and find the hummingbirds when they land on a branch or, hovering by the feeder, but without the feeder in the picture. And it's just evolved. And now watching the birds and learning their behavior, swans on a lake, and watching them swim and looking and going, oh, they're going to start to take off. So then I can capture them running across the water. And just little things, the more that you learn about any animal's behavior, you can predict when they're going to do things. Hawks and eagles, if they're going to take off, they always poop right before they do. So if they
note to
stand
self,
there
note to self, Tracey, don't be standing underneath.
No, and if they poop, then get ready because you're going to get the wings outstretched and they're going to take off.
Okay. The swans are incredible to watch, aren't they? I have a bit of I don't know. I'm not all that keen on the swans on our local river. They're just a bit mean and grumpy. I'm going to call them it's our equivalent of a moose, I think, along the Kennet, because they come out onto the path and they stand their ground. It's like, you're not coming this way. And I'm walking with my little cockapoo Barney, and I'm thinking, I don't want to have a fight with you today. We end up walking the other way.
It would be like our Canada geese. Canada geese are mean. Yes. They're very mean birds.
Well, they make very good guard birds, don't they? I had a friend of mine on a farm with Canada geese, and they would be the first to make lots of noise if they saw anybody on the land. But the swans, they're beautiful. I've not made a lot of wildlife pictures, but I have one that I took which is particularly precious, and it was of them coming into land. I've called it undercarriage down, because their legs come, and it's just at that moment where it just meets the water for the first time, and you see the line behind it.
Yeah, it's really cool. This past spring, I was just outside of Calgary, and same thing on a side road, and I pulled over, and the ice was melting, and the whole pond was full of trumpeter swans. And I've never seen that many before, and the noise... It was like you could definitely tell why they called them trumpeters, because it sounded like a whole bunch of trumpet going off at once. And it was just amazing to sit there and watch them and to listen. And, some would take off, and then you'd have 4 more come in and land. And a group of 6 or 7 would run across the water and take off in the other direction to move away from them. And it was just incredible.
Well, while you're talking about noise, you make all these exquisite, beautiful pictures of wildlife, and you're talking to us about, noticing the patterns of how animals act, and photographing hummingbirds and through the mist and these very serene scenes. But some of the time you're doing it with your AirPods in or whatever you use, blasting you with heavy metal. I'm not quite sure how the two work together, but they obviously do.
I'm not sure. And my favorite band is Iron Maiden. We just went and saw Judas Priest in concert a few months ago, and Rob Halford's in his 70s now.
And still
he still sounds absolutely amazing. It was so good. Moves a little slower, walks around with a cane, but
he's still doing it.
Still out there. Yeah. And there's quite a few of my photographer friends who do listen to metal. And I don't know, it's almost like it releases that pent up energy or whatever. I listen to other forms of music as well, but that's my favorite.
Your focus has been wildlife and landscape. I know you shoot some portraits, but recently a friend of yours called you and initially when I read this, I thought, I'm not sure I'd like that. I'd say, how dare you? But a generalist photographer. You have fully embraced that label and quite enjoy it.
I do. So initially, I never wanted to photograph people. It was always just about the natural world. And over the last few years, I've discovered that I want to learn more. I want to learn about lighting. I've done a couple of workshops shooting portraits outdoors using lights. And the difference that it makes is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I've got some personal projects that I want to do. I'll do a model call and just ask, hey, is anybody interested in doing this? One's going to involve getting very muddy and dirty.
I'm not coming on that one.
No, you don't want to. You'll have to wear a bathing suit.
You definitely don't want me.
But I think just to tell stories.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, I don't want to photograph families unless it's my own, but to be able to create something that makes people wonder more about what's happening in the image.
There's a wonderful story, perhaps you could tell it, of somebody who visited one of your chapters of Through the Mist.
So I had a solo show in the Cranbrook Art Gallery, and I had the first 2 chapters of Through the Mist hanging, as well as some other pieces of wild faces and wild places. And a young woman had walked around the Through the Mist exhibit, and she came up to me afterwards and said, I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed your photographs.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, thank you. And then she said, and I read your words, and she burst into tears. And I started crying as well. And I said, thank you very much, because that shows me that the message and the story I'm telling is getting through and is affecting people. And it's an important story. There's quite a bit more to it as well, but some of it you can find on my website. The first 2 chapters are there with the words and the images.
There seems to be a kind of I'm not going to say a full circle here because there's so much more of your photography to come, but there's a kind of a full circle in terms of last year, because I think that course that you went on, difficult that it was, that workshop that you attended, which really energized your creative spirit, even if it didn't do that for your body at the time. But last year, 2024, this is all about giving back, really. You've taught your first photography classes, which is wonderful.
So the ones that I taught were in Elkford. It was just a little weekly course that we did. And the first day we talked about camera settings and, if you wanted to get out of program or auto mode. And then I said, that's it. We're not talking about how to use your camera. We're going to go outside and walk around and work on showing you how to see things around you.
Yeah.
And especially in the everyday and the mundane. It was spring. Everything was kind of brown. And one of the best days we did a walk up and down the creek. So the one side of the creek is poplar trees and grass and pine trees and stuff like that. The other side of the creek is the edge of a cliff, and it's moss and mushrooms and old growth forest and stuff like that. And it was, some people shot with cell phones. some shot with cameras. And it was really, really interesting. Everybody threw a photo into a Facebook group after. And it was really interesting to see what people saw when they just slowed down and looked around. And I'm looking forward to teaching more of that. I'm doing a workshop with another photographer in June of this year and have created, I guess, in a sense, a business called the Mindful Lens.
Yeah.
So we're doing it as a retreat per se, with some yoga and meditation and mindful photography, and just teaching people techniques and tools to use photography to help them find peace in the busy world that we live in these days.
Well, if anybody's qualified to take that workshop, to teach that workshop or lead that workshop, I would say that has to be you. I love some of your quotes. Do you mind me reading a few?
No.
Life truly is a gift, and I'm not done opening all the boxes yet.
Yeah.
My kids would have had all the boxes open and looked inside by now.
When that came to me, it was just basically realizing that it's been 6 years since my transplant now, and I'm at a good place now. Like I still, get super emotional over things, and I'll cry when I talk about what I went through, and there's still bits and pieces that nobody really knows because there was some really bad stuff too. Yeah. But now I'm at a point where I want to get out and experience everything that I can and not miss out on things because I'm too scared, or because I feel that I'm not in good enough shape physically to do it, or like just constantly learning, constantly growing and putting myself out there. And I guess in a sense, sharing that, you really need to appreciate life and what you have, because there's good somewhere. You can always find some good.
Well, that plays beautifully into the other quote that I'd noted from you. Most of us live in the two places where nothing ever happens, the past and the future, but the present is all we have. And actually, I'll be fair, I was working with a researcher on this one, and that's what Michael Mixon pulled out from your work. It's interesting when two people work together on something. You say, well, what do you see? and that's what Michael saw. Most of us live in the two places where nothing ever happens, the past and the future, but the present is all we have, which I would imagine will be something that you'll be teaching at your workshop for mindfulness.
Yeah, you have to let go of the past.
Yeah.
I live very much in, you have an argument with a friend or with a spouse or whatever, you can't hold on to it, because the way I look, how would you feel if you go to bed angry, you wake up angry, and something happened and that person's gone? That's not how I would want to remember all the other stuff that happened, or even for me, you wake up one morning and all of a sudden you're told that your life changed. Overnight, my life changed. I went from doing what I wanted, being able to go where I wanted, to being tied to a machine. And it's a pretty big change. I think it was difficult enough for me to handle knowing what was coming. For somebody who didn't know what was coming, I think it would have been very, very difficult.
Well, I'm leaving lots of links to your work, and we'll share some work on the show page as well, if that's okay with you. I do want to ask you a question that you may know is coming or not. I'm not quite sure, but it's a question that we ask of all our guests now, of all my guests, and is simply why. And I think you're perfectly positioned to answer this. Why you do what you do, why photography is important, why living in the moment is important. What Tracey, is your why?
My why is I want to show people what I see through my wide open eyes, because I do see things so much differently now. And I wouldn't wish a life-changing experience on anyone, but it truly does make you look at things differently. Just to be so appreciative of everything. It doesn't matter if it's minus 17, it's still a beautiful day.
And my thanks to Tracey Halladay, who will, of course, be featured pictorially on the show page. I've got some photographs from Tracey to show you with lots of links as well. Oh, it's been lovely walking somewhere different today. I'm definitely not going to make. I'll have an opportunity before it goes dark to photograph Jane Austen's house. But I definitely will not be going inside. I mean, look at me. Look at these boots. And then I had a load of labs run up. I love labs, love Labradors, but I wasn't expecting to be pounced on in a nice way. They weren't being aggressive or anything. I think they could smell the treats that sometimes are in this jacket pocket here. They're good like that, Labradors, aren't they? So they ought to look at my jeans. Look at me. Look. I usually am crestfallen. No, I'm always crestfallen if Barney does that to somebody. But this dog owner didn't really seem to care. Probably because I was having a bit of rough and tumble with the dogs. They probably thought, doesn't matter. Let me get a photograph of the tree. I bet you Jane Austen, she saw this tree. She did. Right. It's not the nicest light today. It's not what I would call really expressive. Oh, blimey, look at that battery. Almost, I hope I got a spare. Otherwise I'm not going to get Jane Austen's house. 250th, F6. Or 250 ISO, rather. F6, 1/2/5 shutter speed. There we go. Old and new next to each other. Jane Austen wouldn't have seen that one. Neil, stop it with the Jane Austen tree thing, would you? Okay. So yes, my thanks to Tracey today. It was a real joy talking with you. It really was. And that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you'd like to walk a little further together, then there's the Extra Mile edition number 124, which is waiting for you. It's our extra show for those who support this podcast through Patreon. You go the extra mile for me, so I go the extra mile for you. And the really special thing about this show is that, you become the stars of it. We find out about our wonderful community through my Shoot the Breeze chats, about your projects, your ideas. We get lots and lots of inspiration. And this week, Extra Miler Ted Manassa joins me, and our conversation takes some real twists and turns, from making hairs stand up on the back of our necks as we remember Blair Witch, to historical facts from Cambodia that I was equally horrified and fascinated by. So history, and then how sailing to the furthest reaches of the world to teach your children the importance of nature can be as you can imagine, a life-changing experience.
On this week's Extra Mile.
How wild, or I should say how productive nature is when humans are not there trying to build condos. And there's two reasons for that in the Antarctic region. One is that some humans, governments are very protective of those areas, South Georgia Island, the Falklands in particular. They're extremely strict about what you can and can't do, to the point where before you go onto those islands, you must check the Velcro in your jacket cuff to ensure that there aren't any seeds stuck to them. You use a paperclip to dig out any rocks in your boots to make sure that you're not tracking bacteria from one island to the other. Bird flu is a real thing, and it wipes out hundreds of thousands of penguins and other seabirds, at a time. So because of that strictness, they're able to maintain the purity of the environment, and the environment thrives.
The first 5 minutes of the show is available for free, so click the link on the website for the Extra Mile, and a mention too for our monthly InVision Zoom show, which happens on the first Tuesday of each month. They come round quick, don't they? Oh, did you hear that? Run, rabbit, run. Yeah, I would. Another bang. Yes, next one is next week. Next week already. PS to the show is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to, or think about, and there's lots to think about what's been said today. And I'm choosing this for two reasons. One, to accompany Tracey's incredible life story as she now strives to give back what photography brought her in times of mindfulness. And on that note, you'll recognise the melody because I used the instrumental for the poem For the Path that Xavier sent in. But I guess there's also, and this is the second reason, there's also a sailing theme which will make more sense for those who listen to the Extra Mile this week. It's a beautiful, airy and wonderful, and any other word I could possibly think of that sits in the same category. It's everything a photo walk play-out song should be. It features the voice of Amaryllis. This is a wonderful song, and it's called Sail Away.
You say you don't know where you go. birds keep flying away, away, away. Ooh, lost in your world. Ooh, memories of hope. Ooh, lost in your world. Ooh, looking for hope. You can stay in this burning land with tears in your hand. Keep sailing away, away, away. Ooh, lost in your world. Ooh, memories of hope. Ooh, lost in your world. Ooh, looking for hope. Lost in your world. Memories of hope. Lost in your world. Looking for hope. Lost in your world. Memories of hope. Lost in your world. Looking for hope.
What a wonderful, wonderful voice that Amaryllis has. A song called Sail Away. Final sketchbook picture. I tell you what, I'm going to do the final sketchbook picture. Not necessarily now, but in a moment. I'm going to have to, I'm just about a mile away actually, so it's a fair walk. I've timed that badly. I want to get a picture of Jane Austen's house. Does it have curtains in there, Neil? Yes, it does have curtains. Will they be the ones that you drew in a rather aggressive manner when you were working on a wedding one time? Is it a story you could possibly tell us about? Oh, don't you start. Just a few closing thoughts before the postscript today. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world together. A safe place to share our thoughts about this thing we do, photographing and walking. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members, with a new team member now, Michael Mixon, working on research. Right, a postscript for the show. Today it's from Brené Brown, a research professor, an author and speaker, known for her groundbreaking work on vulnerability and courage, shame and empathy. Particularly known, I will find this actually, a note to self, known for her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, and books like Daring Greatly. And I thought one of her inspirational vulnerability quotes would make a very good PS, because we all practice the V word when we share our work in the world, don't we? to varying degrees, I appreciate, but we do. But being creative and being human demands much in the vulnerability wing of life. So from Brené Brown, well, actually, can I choose 3? I know it's 1, and from time to time we step outside that number, but I want to choose 3 since she is an expert in vulnerability. So from Brené, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity and change, and I think that plays very well into photography. Then I like this one as well. Vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. I like that one. But then this one, if I had to choose just one, it would have been this. Vulnerability isn't winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.